There is a moment in every revenge story where the woman holding the knife realizes she has fallen in love with the man whose throat she came to cut. Adaeze Okonkwo had that moment on a Tuesday night in Seoul, on the 41st floor of a luxury Gangnam penthouse, with a small notebook in her hand that proved, beyond any doubt, that the Korean Mafia chairman she had been planning to destroy for 2 years was not the man she thought he was. The notebook was written in his own handwriting. It contained the name of her father, and beside her father's name, in the chairman's quiet, careful Korean, were the words, "Family stipend paid." 12 months. Wife and 4 sons. He had been quietly supporting her family for 9 months. And she had come to Seoul to kill him. My friend, some stories begin with a lie. The right kind of lie. The kind that, told carefully enough, slowly bends itself into a truth that neither person ever saw coming. Welcome to the Storyverse. This is one of those stories. The story of a Nigerian woman who learned Korean in 18 months for one reason. The story of a Korean chairman who answered her in his own language and discovered, too late, that she had answered him back. The story of a maid who spoke Hangul. Sit close. Listen carefully. This one is going to stay with you. The first time Suh Jin-woo met the woman who would change his life, he did not look up from his desk. It was a cold Wednesday morning in early October. The Seoul press called him a businessman. The back rooms of Gangnam called him something darker. He did not have time for a job interview. But Mrs. Lim, his elderly housekeeping manager of 12 years, had insisted. "Sir, the agency has sent a new candidate. She has flown from Lagos. The least you can do is look at her." So Jin-woo had grunted. The heavy oak door had opened, and a tall Nigerian woman in a simple grey blouse and a dark blue skirt had walked in and stood in front of his desk with her hands folded politely. Name. In Korean. Adaeze Okonkwo, sir. In English. Age. 28. Previous employment. Hotel housekeeper at the Lagos Continental for 3 years before I came to Korea, sir. He turned a page of his report. He had not looked up. Why do you want this position? A small pause. The salary is good, she said, in a voice that was steady and soft and absolutely calm. I send money home to my younger brothers. It was, technically, the truth. She was also the daughter of a Nigerian engineer named Emeka Okonkwo, who was, at that very moment, sitting in a maximum security prison in Ibadan for a financial crime he had not committed, framed by men who worked for the Korean Mafia boss who had been trying to destroy the Suh family for 10 years. Her father's last letter from prison, smuggled out by a bribed guard, had told her one thing. The man who could free him, or finish him, was Suh Jin-woo. Trust no one. Find the file yourself. She had spent 18 months learning Korean for this moment. She had spent her father's last savings on a one-way plane ticket. She had walked into this office knowing exactly who Suh Jin-woo was. And the chairman had not looked up. Start Monday, he said, still reading. Mrs. Lim will brief you. Do not enter my private office. Do not speak to me unless I speak to you first. Yes, sir. In her perfect, careful, almost too good English. She turned to leave. Behind her, 2 men were waiting in the outer office to ride down with her in the elevator. The first was Mr. Park, Jin-woo's grey-haired head of security, who had served the Suh family for 30 years and looked at every new face the way a father looks at a stranger near his daughter. Park watched her cross the room and said nothing. But his eyes did not leave her hands. The second man was younger, soft-faced, polite. He bowed slightly as she passed. Welcome to the family, Miss Okonkwo, he said in careful English. I am Gumin J, Senior Accounts. If you need anything, please come to me. She bowed back. She did not look at him too long. And the war began. Listen. A Nigerian woman walks into a Korean Mafia chairman's office in a borrowed blouse, with revenge in her pocket, and the chairman does not even look up. If a story like this is the kind that already has you holding your breath, tap that like button. Just tap it. It costs you 1 second, and it tells me to keep telling these Afro-Korean stories. Then come back, because in 7 days, on the cold marble floor of a kitchen she does not own, Adaeze is going to find something in that man's bedroom drawer that will rearrange her entire life. There is a moment, in every spy story, where the spy makes their first mistake. Adaeze made hers on her 7th day. She had been the perfect housekeeper, silent, polite, almost invisible. And in every quiet hour when Jin-woo was at the office, she had been moving room by room, drawer by drawer. On the 7th day, in the drawer of his bedside table, she found a small black leather notebook. It was a list, 43 names in Jin-woo's careful Korean. Beside each name, a date. Beside each date, a small notation. She sat on the edge of his bed and read, and as she read, her hands began to tremble. Because the list was not what she had expected. It was not a list of his enemies. It was a list of people his rival had hurt. 43 innocent people the Cholet organization had framed, kidnapped, broken, or killed over 10 years. Beside each name, in Jin-woo's hand, the small quiet thing he had done in secret for the families left behind. Tuition for daughter, paid through anonymous foundation. Lawyer for the appeal, secured. Mother's medical bills, covered. 43 names. On entry number 37, she found her own family. Adaeze Okonkwo. Lagos. Arrested March 11th. And beside it, in the chairman's neat hand, lawyer in Ibadan, paid. Wife and 4 sons, monthly stipend through Lagos Foundation, 12 months. Investigation ongoing, find the file. She closed the notebook very slowly. She put it back exactly where she had found it. She walked into the kitchen and sat down on the cold marble floor with her back against the cabinets, and she stared at her own dark hands in her lap. Suh Jin-woo had been paying her family's stipend for 9 months. The money her mother had been receiving, the money that had kept her younger brothers in school, that had paid for her father's prison lawyer, had been coming from the man she had come to Korea to destroy. Her revenge had no target. And the man she had come to destroy was now the only man in the world who could possibly help her father. And he had told her not to speak to him unless he spoke to her first. What Adaeze did not yet know, sitting on that cold kitchen floor, was that Jin-woo had been watching her since the 2nd day. He had walked into the kitchen at 6 in the morning, expecting it to be empty, and had found his new housekeeper slicing fruit with the kind of slow, careful precision that was the first thing Mr. Bark used to teach his young men. Bark had a saying, "Watch a woman's hands. A woman's hands tell you who she really is." On the 3rd day, Jin-woo had passed her in the hallway, and her eyes had flicked up to meet his for half a second before she lowered them politely. In that half second, he had seen something he had not expected. He had seen study. On the 4th day, he had returned home at midnight and walked through the dark penthouse and checked her room. He had found a Korean grammar book on the small table by her bed. The advanced edition. The kind a Korean university student would use, not a beginner. By the 7th day, the day she found the notebook, he had decided he was going to find out who she was. So, on the 10th day, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, he set a small trap. She was arranging white roses in the tall crystal vase by the living room window. He had requested the roses 2 days earlier, casually, knowing she would buy them and arrange them on the weekend. He walked into the room. He did not greet her. He walked to the bar cart, poured himself a small glass of soju, and stood looking out the floor-to-ceiling window at the grey afternoon sky. He did not look at her. And then, in a quiet voice, in Korean, in a Seoul accent so casual that no foreigner who had only studied Korean from a textbook could have caught it, he said, almost to himself, "Roses are a stupid flower. They die before they have even begun to live." I should have asked her to bring lilies instead. It was a sentence designed to be understood only by a native speaker. Adaeze's hands stopped moving. She did not look up. She did not speak. But for a fraction of a second, a half breath, no more, her shoulders went perfectly still. Jin-woo did not turn around. He was watching her reflection in the dark window glass. He had seen the stillness. She made a careful, deliberate effort to keep arranging the roses. She finished. She picked up the empty wrappers. She turned to leave the room. And then, she paused. And then, in a voice that was steady and soft and absolutely calm, in Korean, in a Seoul accent that matched his exactly, she said, "Lilies last longer in winter, but they smell like funerals. The roses suit your apartment better, sir. I am sorry I cannot do anything about how soon they die." Then she walked out of the room. Jin-woo did not move. He stood at the window with the small glass of soju in his hand for a very long time. Then he set the glass down very carefully on the bar cart. And he smiled, for the first time in 9 months. A small, thin, dangerous smile. That night, at 11:30, the chairman would summon her to his private study. Adaeze would walk down that long hallway knowing, with absolute clarity, that she might not survive the night. Because the Suh family did not raise its voice, it simply made things into accidents. But what neither of them knew, walking toward each other through the dark, was that the answer they were both about to give each other was going to start a war that would end with one of them holding the other on a parking lot floor at 2 in the morning. And the only loyal friend in the chairman's world dead in a storage unit 3 blocks away. Stay with me. Mrs. Lim knocked at 11:30. "Miss Okonkwo, the chairman would like to see you." In his private study. Now. Adaeze rose. She put on her grey cardigan. She followed Mrs. Lim down the long hallway. She had known, the moment she answered him in Korean, that this conversation was coming. She walked into the chairman's study with her chin lifted. Jin-woo was sitting behind his dark wood desk in a black silk shirt with the sleeves rolled up. The desk lamp threw a single warm circle of light over his hands. The rest of the room was in shadow. Mrs. Lim closed the door behind her. They were alone. "Sit." In Korean. She sat. "Tell me your real name. In your own language." She looked at him for a long moment. Then, in her native Igbo, "My name is Adaeze Okonkwo. My father is Emeka Okonkwo of Lagos. He has been in Ibadan prison for 9 months for a crime he did not commit. I came to Korea to find the file he gave to you. I came to your house to destroy you. I believed you had betrayed him. Now I am not sure what I believe." Jin-woo did not understand a word of Igbo, but he had heard the cadence. He had seen her face. He had watched her say her father's name, and the name of the Lagos prison. He nodded once. "Emeka Okonkwo," he said quietly, in English. "Your father." "Yes." "And what changed?" She pulled out her phone. She turned the screen toward him. A photograph of entry 37. Under his desk, his right hand quietly relaxed. He had been ready since she walked in. Jin-woo looked at the photograph, and the chairman of the Suh family slowly lifted his eyes to the woman across the desk. "Miss Okonkwo, I think you and I have been fighting on the same side for 9 months, and neither of us has known." They talked until 4 in the morning. She told him everything. The 18 months of Korean lessons in a small goes flat while her brothers slept. The agency, the flight, the notebook, the cold kitchen floor. And Jin-woo told her his side. Her father had come to his Seoul office on a rainy Tuesday last March with a brown leather folder of documents and tired eyes that had reminded him, painfully, of his own dead father. Jin-woo had promised him the file would be safe. 3 days later, he had walked into his own private vault, and the file had been gone. Someone in his organization had taken it. Someone close to him. He had spent 9 months trying to find that traitor without anyone knowing he was looking. Because the moment the traitor knew, the file would be destroyed, and her father would die in Ibadan. "Why have you been paying our stipend?" she asked. "Because your father trusted me, and I lost what he gave me. There is a debt of honor. Paying the stipend was the smallest, most useless thing I could think of. I did it because I could not bear to do nothing. Adaeze did not speak for a long time. Then she reached across the desk and placed her hand, very gently, over his. It was the first time in 9 months that anyone had touched his hand. It was the first time in 18 months that Adaeze had touched another human being who was not her own brother. They both stopped breathing for a moment. "Mr. Sir, we have both been alone in this for too long. May I help you find the traitor?" Yes. And the war began again, this time, together. If you are still here with me, still feeling for Adaeze, still listening for Jin-woo, let me ask you one small thing. Subscribe to the Storyverse. Tap the She moved out of the small guest suite the next morning. She would live in the visiting executive apartment 3 blocks from the penthouse. She was no longer his housekeeper. She was a partner. Mr. Bark drove her there himself. It was the first time she had been alone in a car with him. Grey-haired, soft-spoken, the kind of man who looked like a retired schoolteacher and had in his time almost certainly broken men's hands. He drove for 3 blocks without speaking. Then, in his slow, careful English, "Miss Okonkwo. The chairman is a careful man. He has not slept properly since your father came to his office. He thought he could carry it alone. He could not." She looked at him. "Mr. Bark, are you on his side, or are you on the family's side?" "For 30 years I have been on the chairman's side, Miss Okonkwo, and the chairman has always been on the family's side, so the question has never come up." He paused. "But I am old. And I will tell you something, woman to old man. When he met your father last March, he came home and ate dinner with my wife and me. He laughed once. I had not heard him laugh in 5 years. Whoever your father is, bring him home. The chairman will be a better man for it." When they reached the executive apartment, Bark placed a small paper bag on the kitchen counter. "My wife sent these. Dried sweet potato. It is what Korean grandmothers send when they want a person to live." He bowed slightly and left. She did not cry until the door closed. They worked in the chairman's private study every night for 11 days. Door locked. Mr. Bark standing guard outside. Jin-woo had been hunting the traitor by looking at who had access to the vault during the 72 hours the file went missing. He had narrowed the list to 9 senior men. He could not narrow it further. On the 4th night, Adaeze said something quiet. "Mr. Sir, you are looking for the moment the file was stolen. May I look instead for the moment the thief rehearsed?" Jin-woo looked up. "My father is an engineer. He taught me one thing about fraud. A careful man does not steal what he has not first practiced stealing. Show me the vault access logs for the 2 weeks before the theft, not during." She was, it turned out, a brilliant investigator. The thing her brothers had never understood about their quiet older sister, that she had inherited her father's slow, methodical engineer's mind, was about to save the Suh family. On the 8th night, at 2 in the morning, she circled a name in her exercise book and turned it toward Jin-woo, a man who had accessed the vault 3 times in the 2 weeks before the theft, all at unusual hours, all for reasons that, on paper, were perfectly defensible. But 3 rehearsals in 14 days, by a man whose actual job rarely required the vault, was a signature. An engineer would have seen it. 11 Korean investigators had not. The name circled in pencil was Gu Min-jae. They had 3 days to recover the file before Gu Min-jae could destroy it. 3 days, and they could not move openly without warning him. Mr. Bark volunteered for the operation himself. He told the chairman it was an old man's job, and old men were expendable. Jin-woo refused twice. Bark insisted a 3rd time. On a freezing Friday night, with the sweet potato grandmother's husband already in position outside a Seoul self-storage facility, Adaeze was going to find out what an old man's word costs in the only world Mr. Bark had ever served. Stay with me. They tracked Goo Min-jae by tracking his cousin's car. He had been clever about his own movements. He had not been clever about his family's. Late on Friday night, his cousin's old grey sedan pulled up to a small 24-hour self-storage facility on the outskirts of Seoul. Mr. Bark was already there. He had told Adaeze that afternoon that she was not to come, that she had done her part, that the rest was an old man's work. She had argued. He had ended the argument with one Korean sentence. "Daughter, your father is waiting. Stay alive for him." She had stayed in the chairman's car around the corner. At 12:40 in the morning, Bark slipped into the storage corridor behind Goo Min-jae. At 12:47, Adaeze heard a single muffled shot from inside the building. She did not wait. She found Bark on the cold concrete floor of Unit 14, one hand pressed to his side, the brown leather folder of her father's documents open beside him. He was still breathing. Barely. "Photographs," he whispered. "Take photographs. Of everything. Fast." She knelt beside him. She took out her phone. Her father had taught her one rule: an engineer always backs up the work before she trusts the original. She had been photographing every document she touched for 2 months. Habit. Now. In 4 seconds she had photographed every page. "Now go," Bark whispered. "He is coming back. Go." "Mr. Bark, daughter, go." She stood up. She heard footsteps at the end of the corridor. And Adaeze Okonkwo, Lagos born, daughter of Emeka, looked at the half-open door of the storage unit, and she did the one thing Goo Min-jae would not be expecting. She threw the folder, hard, to her left, into the deep darkness behind a row of metal shelves. Goo Min-jae stepped into the doorway with his gun raised. His eyes flicked instinctively after the folder. And in that 1 second of flicked eyes, Adaeze was already running. Past him. She slammed her shoulder into the half-open metal door as she went, sending it rolling shut between them. She heard the gunshot crack against the inside of the metal. She made it to the alley. She made it 3 blocks before her legs gave out, and she had to stop and lean against a street lamp and breathe. She had no folder. She had no Mr. Bark. She had her phone, and on her phone, every page of her father's life. She called Jin-woo. He answered on the first ring. "Adaeze, where are you? Where is Bark? Are you safe?" And Adaeze, leaning against a Seoul street lamp at 1:30 in the morning, said, "Mr. Suh, I have the file. Mr. Bark is gone. I am so sorry. Please come." He came in 12 minutes. He was driving himself. He had not woken his driver. He had not called any of his other men, because he no longer knew which of them could be trusted. He pulled up to the street lamp. She got into the passenger seat. He drove for 2 blocks without speaking. Then he pulled the car into the empty parking lot of a small closed shrine garden. He turned off the engine. They sat in the dark, and Suh Jin-woo, the man who had not cried in 20 years, leaned his forehead against the steering wheel, and his shoulders began, very slightly, to shake. "Bark," he whispered. In Korean. "Old friend. I am sorry. I am so sorry, old friend." Adaeze did not move. She did not know how to comfort a Korean Mafia chairman. She did not know if he wanted comfort. She knew only that the loneliest sound she had ever heard in her life was coming from the man behind the steering wheel. So she did the only thing she could think of. She reached across the small space between their seats, and she placed her hand, very gently, on the back of his neck. He went very still, and then, Slowly, he turned his head toward her, and his eyes in the dark of the car were the eyes of a man who had not been touched gently in 20 years and had forgotten, until this moment, how badly he had needed it. He leaned forward. Slowly, she leaned forward too. Just slightly. Their foreheads touched. Not their mouths, just their foreheads, and they stayed like that, in the dark of a parked car at 2 a.m. in the empty lot of a Seoul shrine garden, breathing each other's breath. Neither of them moving forward, neither of them moving back. "Adaeze," he whispered. In Korean, yes, Jin-woo, in Korean. "Not yet." "No," she said. "Not yet. Not until my father is home." He nodded. Just once, forehead still against hers. Then, "Let us bring your father home." What Jin-woo did between Saturday morning and Wednesday evening would be discussed in whispers in the back rooms of Seoul finance for years. Adaeze's phone photographs went, anonymously, to 3 places at once. First, the office of the senior prosecutor of the Seoul Central District, a famously incorruptible woman who had been quietly building her own case against Cho Tae-min for 7 years. Second, the public prosecutor of Lagos, with a cover note from one of Korea's top law firms, quietly hired by an anonymous Korean foundation, formally requesting immediate review of the case of Adaeze Okonkwo. Third, the morning edition of the Cho Sun Ilbo. By Sunday evening, the lead story across South Korea was the criminal exposure of Cho Tae-min's organization. By Monday morning, 3 of his senior men had been arrested. By Monday evening, Gu Min-jae had been found dead in a hotel room. Cho did not tolerate failures. By Tuesday morning, Cho Tae-min himself had been arrested at his Gangnam home in front of his wife and his 3 sons. By Wednesday evening, Adaeze Okonkwo had been formally cleared by the Lagos court of all charges. On Thursday morning, a Korean private jet, registered to one of the Suh family's quieter shell companies, landed at Murtala Muhammad International Airport in Lagos. Adaeze Okonkwo, 58 years old, gaunt, his eyes tired but alive, walked out of the small terminal with a single suitcase. He stopped at the bottom of the steps, and he saw, on the tarmac, his oldest daughter in a long grey coat against a Seoul cold she had grown used to, standing beside a Korean man in a black coat with his hands in his pockets. Adaeze walked across the tarmac. She did not run. She walked the way her father had taught her to walk when she was a small girl, with dignity, with a straight back. She made it 5 steps before her father broke. And then she ran, and he caught her. And the 2 of them stood there on the African tarmac holding each other, and somewhere on the asphalt behind them, a Korean chairman, with his hands in his pockets, watched a woman come home to her father, and felt, for the first time in 20 years, that he had perhaps been worth something useful in this world. Adaeze refused to stay in the chairman's penthouse. He insisted, in his quiet engineer's way, on the visiting executive apartment 3 blocks down. On his second night in Seoul, holding his daughter's hand in the small kitchen, he asked her, in their own language, what she would do now. She did not answer for a long time. "I do not know yet, Papa." The Korean man, her father said. He was not asking a question. He was naming a thing. She nodded. Adaeze looked at his oldest daughter for a long, careful moment. "Bring him here tomorrow," he said. "Let me look at him." So she did. The chairman of the Suh family sat across from a small, thin, tired Nigerian engineer in a borrowed grey sweater, in a small visiting executive kitchen, and answered every question the older man asked him. Some of the questions were practical, some of the questions were not. At the end of an hour, Adaeze said, in his careful English, Mr. Sir, you have spent much of your money to bring me home. I am very grateful. But I want to tell you one thing. My daughter is not for sale, not for any amount of money. If you want her, you must want her in your house and in your name and in your heart for the rest of your life. Anything less than that is an insult. Jin-woo did not blink. Sir, he said quietly, I do not want anything less than that. Emeka nodded. Then we understand each other. And he poured Jin-woo a small cup of strong Nigerian coffee. That night, when her father was asleep, Jin-woo took Adaeze up to the roof of his Gangnam building. 41 stories above Seoul. The wind pulled at her natural curls. The lights of the city below stretched to the horizon. He did not look at her. Adaeze, I have been a chairman for 15 years. Until you walked into my office in a grey blouse and lied to me about being a hotel housekeeper, I had forgotten that being a chairman was not the same as being a man. She turned to him. And what would you like to be now, Jin-woo? I would like, he said, to be the man who walks beside you for the rest of his life. If you will let him. Adaeze rose up on her toes in the cold Seoul wind, and she kissed him. It was their first real kiss. Quick, almost shy. The kiss of a woman who had spent 2 years preparing to destroy a man and had ended up loving him instead. When she pulled back, his eyes were closed. Emeka flew home to Lagos 8 days later. His daughter did not go with him. He did not ask her to. Cholete Min was sentenced to 38 years in prison. Mr. Park's funeral was held privately in a small mountain village near Daegu, where he had been born. Jin-woo gave the eulogy in a voice that broke twice. Adaeze stood beside him and held his hand the whole time. When the service was over, the chairman of the Suh family, in front of the full assembled families of every man who had ever served the family for 50 years, introduced the Nigerian woman beside him as my future wife. And nobody in any of those old families raised an objection, because a man who had loved Park would not have introduced anyone he did not believe in. They were married in the spring. It was a small wedding, partly Korean and partly Nigerian. Emeka gave the bride away. Adaeze's 3 brothers flew to Seoul for the first time in their lives. Mrs. Lim cried more than the bride. And every year, on the anniversary of the night they sat in a parked car in an empty shrine parking lot at 2 in the morning, with their foreheads pressed together, Jin-woo and Adaeze drive to the same parking lot, alone, no driver, no security. They turn off the car. He puts his forehead against hers. And he whispers, "Old friend Park, I am keeping my promise. Every year, I am keeping my promise." This was the story of a woman who came to Korea to bury a chairman and ended up marrying him. It happened because, on a Saturday afternoon, a man poured a small glass of soju and remarked that roses are a stupid flower. And a Nigerian housekeeper answered him in his own language. Some doors only open once. She walked through hers. So, that was the story of Adaeze and Jin-woo, a maid who spoke Hangul, a chairman who poured soju on a Saturday afternoon and changed his own life with a single sentence. Tell me in the comments below, have you ever walked into a room ready to destroy someone and walked out loving them instead? Have you ever pretended to be someone you were not and become someone better in the lie? Tell me your story. I read every comment, every one. And if this story moved you, share it with one person tonight. The friend who has stopped trusting people. They might need it more than you know. Subscribe, like, and comment. Turn the bell on. Until the next story, be the one who does not look away.